mean, imagine, I was telling Jess yesterday, it's like you're burning rocks to make energy in a coal plant. You were splitting atoms to make energy in a nuclear power plant, and you have to make all of this stuff safe. I mean, it's wild, all the stuff that goes into it. It's very technical. And yet, a lot of it gets overlooked because either people don't want to work in government, they view it as very monolithic and destructive. Some people feel that way about energy companies. But if you have a particular point of view about the environment, it's very passionate to you, it's an issue you're very impassioned about, I mean, that seems to me to be the best way you can make an individual difference is to get involved in it. Not just get involved in government as a citizen, but to work in these industries, you know, to go to conferences where people are talking about environmental issues and have your say there. Because it is a smaller world than you would think, too, when it comes to things like, the utility industry or who regulates it. I mean, there's a lot of room for an individual to have a lot of say. And, I wouldn't say go into it, if you have no tolerance for bureaucracy and nonsense now and then. But if you do believe in the idea of government can get better, and can occasionally facilitate solutions, then working in it, I think, is the first step. So, yeah.
Let's do 2 audience questions, starting with Dr. Joe.
No, if you're only taking 2, go ahead and ask somebody else.
Do you mind? I would love to hear your question.
I just wanted to ask, being a natural gas guy, what are your thoughts about the California ban coming up on gas stoves?
Yeah.
Just background.
It's frustrating because the stoves are one of the few points that they have a point on when it comes to things like air pollution indoors, right? That is a problem when you don't ventilate. Like if you use a gas stove, right? Gas stoves are great. We have a gas stove, but we have to ventilate when we use the gas stove. And if you don't, you are burning a combustible product that does have some particulate matter in your home. And so that's a thing that, you have to use safely. And I've learned in the process of learning about this that some people use their gas stoves for the purpose of heat, which is a terribly wasteful and destructive. But this is a huge use of gas stoves. And so there is a lot of need, I think, for public education and for, more availability of, alternative resources for people who do this kind of stuff. I'm not saying that, that natural gas stoves are a problem just because people make poor decisions. I think a lot of people just don't think about this being a potential health hazard. But the reason it's also such a frustrating issue is the stoves are about, I believe, 2 to 3% of overall gas usage, and yet they are also a very tangible way that people get into using natural gas. Natural gas does have a lot of advantages for the reasons I described. It's not always the best alternative when it comes to environmental protection. It is still ultimately a fossil fuel. But when it comes to being an alternative to something like, say, a coal plant, it's really important. And, to see it kind of arbitrarily banned for reasons that are very minor, it's not great for the, it's the kind of decision that you understand in a small way, but that can have big problems too, And I ultimately don't like to restrict consumer choice when we don't have a good reason to. So.
We got a late start, so we can do a couple more questions. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Eric.
You mentioned nuclear power, and one criticism that's often heard from libertarians is that nuclear power requires some level of government subsidy, limitations on liability, and things like that. So do you think nuclear power could be competitive without government subsidy?
There may be people who disagree. I tend to think the answer is probably no, but I think it's worth thinking about with a little more nuance.